super excited to begin this session with one of my most favorite cousins, one of my most favorite people, my kids' role model, Calina Lawrence, a Squamish tribal member. And with that, I'll go ahead and ask Angela, if you don't mind, to pull up the slides and we'll get started here. It's an honor to be able to introduce Calina and really also thankful that she answered the call to join us today. You may remember her joining us a few years back at our Indigenous Children, Youth and Families Conference when we got to learn a little bit more about the Don't Count Me Out song, the lyrics, what inspired it, along with the video. And we just knew that we needed more time to be able to learn about Calina and the work that she's been doing since then. So thank you for answering the call, Calina. We're so excited that you're joining us. I'll just share a little bit more about Calina, Coast Salish vocalist, multimedia artist, wellness facilitator, tribal elder caregiver. What a blessing. And former foster youth. Member of the Squamish Nation, Calina Lawrence was born and raised within her ancestral culture at a time during the reawakening of the teachings of the canoe and the Coast Salish way of life in the Pacific Northwest. I'm thankful to have been witness to some of the songs that Calina has brought out over the years and witnessed her growth. And in her vocal journey, she began at a young age when she was first introduced to the songs of the canoe, the land, and the Lushootseed language. While lending her voice to the preservation of Squamish traditions, she also grew to love many contemporary genres such as bluegrass, soul, hip hop, and spoken word poetry, which would eventually lead her on a journey to respectfully expressing a fusion of it all. Many of the people who raised her emphasized the importance of spreading awareness about the social and environmental injustices that have impacted the quality of lives on tribal reservations and within urban Native communities. She embraced the awareness of intergenerational trauma combined equally with the example of her people's generosity and resiliency. So liberation work now shapes the lens in which the young artist sees the world. At age 23, Lawrence graduated with honors from the University of San Francisco, attaining a BA in Performing Arts and Social Justice and a music concentration. And since graduation, this independent Indigenous vocalist, aspiring MC and producer, self-released her debut album, Epicenter, in August of 2018. Her most significant single to date, released in August of 2019, entitled Ashaliti Lushootseed, one translation being Lushootseed is alive. It is her first self-produced, hip-hop inspired Salish fusion, and in her words, has been my greatest accomplishment to date, to have access to the language of my ancestors and have the ability to incorporate what I can into my everyday life, including my career. The song is written and performed entirely in the Lushootseed language. It features several members of her Squamish community, while the music video was brought to life by Canyon Productions, a crew completely comprised of Indigenous creatives. All of her music, singles, features, and videos can be found on most streaming platforms. With that, I am super excited to hand it over to Calina Lawrence. Thank you.
You did so great reading that. That was awesome. Hi, Calina. Hi, I love you. Hatlachel, Twagwalapu, Eskodid of Chud, Twagwalapu, Chalap, Hatlislachel. To all of you, I'm grateful to each and every one of you, and this is a good day. Calina Lawrence Seedsta Sokwab Chud Tul Al Chud Sakwab. My name is Calina Lawrence. I am Squamish. I come from the place of the clear salt water. Nancy Alexis Seedsta at Seedskoy, Steve Lawrence Seedsta at Teedbad. My mother is Nancy Alexis, and my father is Steve Lawrence. We are Suquamish, Duwamish, and Port Gamble Sklallam on my father's side, and we are Suquamish, Puyallup, and Yakima on my mother's side. Eslatlil Chadalti Suqub. I currently live in the place of the clear salt water where I was born and raised. As Jo il Chadati su chod chod bitu bushadalti slachel. And I'm just joyful and happy to speak to you folks today. As Talina mentioned, it's just an honor to be here, and I just wanted to thank you for this invitation to come back a few years later and just share a little bit more about my experience, my life, the lessons I've learned, and as we are embracing this theme, honoring our past and celebrating our future. I am 30 years old. I am a cisgender woman. My pronouns are she, her, and si is how we say identify feminine in Twoshu si. I have no children, no biological children of my own, but I'm blessed to help raise many within our community. I am the daughter of two very large families here and even more foster families who cared for me from the ages of 3 years old until I was 18 when I aged out of ICW, TCW. But really, all those families and parents still care for me to this day, even as an adult. I am a multimedia artist, as Talina had mentioned. Primarily a singer, songwriter, poet, MC, and received my bachelor's from the University of San Francisco. So I spent 7 years in Ohlone territory, which is where a lot of my healing and learning and just perspectives of the world had been shaped as in my early 20s. And I graduated in 2016. I also have a certificate in network climate action from Cornell University. I love to braid hair. I started when I was 7 years old. I do a few different forms of beadwork, and I picked up photography a couple years ago. I also just bought a sewing machine recently. So it's just, as you can see, I'm just establishing just the type of modalities I'm geared toward and enjoy. I am a facilitator with Native Wellness Institute and the Indigenous 20-somethings Project, and maybe the most sacred role that I've been blessed to hold in my life is an end-of-life caregiver. And I've been working toward training and certification as a death doula and a home care aide for tribal elders through the state of Washington. Personally and professionally, I've been supporting elders in the final weeks and months of their lives since I was maybe 18, maybe earlier. And it's just kind of been the journey that life has taken me on, not necessarily the one that I was planning for, but in a lot of our Coast Salish ways, we show up when people need the support. And I was thinking before I logged in that many of the elders that I have offered support to in the end of their life have also been foster youth. And that realization was very intense for me. So I just wanted to name that. I want to take this moment to just congratulate all of you for being here for the last 2 days, for your dedication, your love, and your support, and your innovation, and just all that it takes to show up in a space willing and ready to learn, and also willing and ready to teach. And to Talina especially, I've just thought of all the years that you have thought of me. And to be a former foster youth and be thought of in spaces like this is really important. And I always want to name, that when we're gathering in spaces like this, we're we're talking often about children, and they're not always present. Their voices aren't always present. And in the advocacy that we do, it's just, even as a former foster youth, I can offer so much insight, but it's not the voice of someone currently living and experiencing this reality. And so I just want to name all the young people that we serve and love who aren't here on this Zoom with us, but who we know that we learn from and value over time. During this hour together, I'd like to sing and speak and share. Oh, is that a young person that's on with us, maybe? I saw a hand, sorry. And if you are, I apologize if there are young people here who are currently within any of these systems. I want to acknowledge you and hold you up. Um, I hope to sing a little bit more later on, and just speak and share and just strengthen our skills of empathy. Most importantly, that's going to be the consistent theme throughout my time with you all. And I was so excited to hear some of the music during our break, and talk a little bit more about Don't Count Me Out. And that was written in 2017 in the beginning, and then it was actually fully produced and released in 2018. And when I was on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation as a guest in 2017, I was there for about a week, and I was laying down in my tent the first night and just was feeling very emotional from experiencing the land, experiencing the beautiful people, and learning of their efforts, of their struggles, of what was taking place there at the time. And I just heard these words. I heard this melody, and I was laying down to go to sleep, and it just kind of it came through. And the words came to me first, and they were, "I'm done surviving. It's time to thrive now. If it's death or life, don't count me out. I'm done surviving. It's time to thrive now. If it's death or life, I'm choosing life. And also, don't count me out." And hearing these words come from such a powerful place, such powerful lands and elements, just really stuck with me. And the way that I actually heard that melody at first was something like this. I'm done surviving. I'm gonna thrive now. If it's death or life, then don't count me out. And I just sang that over and over again for maybe weeks, maybe months. And when I ran into my friend Desiree Harp, I wanted to show her and talk to her about the creation of this, or the way that this song, this melody, these words came to me, and how, as a former foster youth, there aren't many songs dedicated to us or about our lived experiences. And a lot of times, as artists, if there is something that doesn't exist, then we can take it upon ourselves to create it. And so she and I have had a long-standing love and gratitude and respect for the movement of hip hop, especially, and In my time in the Bay Area, I had evolved as a student of history and hip hop, and I have identified as a poet, since I was in elementary school because it was such a profound and healthy way for me to cope through and cope with what I had been through. And so Desiree and I spend much of our time as Native women, as Native musicians and contemporary artists, um, really honoring and offering our respect and gratitude to Black and Afro-Indigenous loved ones for all of your contributions to life as we know it, and for creating hip hop as a space for youth to exist and resist and learn and build community amidst our parallels of oppression in what we know as the United States. And as time went on, after hearing those words, Desiree and I were able to, revise the melody and kind of work with the words a little bit to get to that version that you hear. No more surviving, it's time to thrive. If it's death or life, don't count me out, don't count me out. No more hiding, it's time to shine. When the people rise, don't count me out, don't count me out. And what I love about music is that it is so similar to us as human beings. We can start in one place, we can evolve and move and learn and grow, and it can become something else. We can be transformed. And I know that lyrics and storytelling and safety and security are all present for me when singing is happening, when creating music is happening. And so that has been a lifeline. And we'll kind of expand on that a little bit later on. So, yesterday and today, you all have been taking time and learning from each other and have been honoring our past and celebrating our future. Like many Native values and customs, we recognize the ones who come before us and had made it just a little bit easier for us to carry on with the work, and hoping that we can make it just a little bit easier for the ones who will come after us. So before joining you all today, I felt it was necessary to call my parents, my birth parents, my biological parents who are still alive and still here and still in my life, for permission to share a little bit about their stories. When we honor the past, right? We're honoring where we're coming from. And they have both given me permission to share a little bit with you all. So my mom was a foster youth as well. And she was sent to Catholic Family Services in Seattle after her mom died in Suquamish. And she was only 14 years old, and she was the oldest sibling of 4. And so the death of a parent is what led her into foster care. My dad was also a foster youth, although his upbringing was not through the legal means. It was through the lifelong, generations long teachings of the village raising our children. And so his grandmother raised him for the first 7 years of his life. And when he was 7, his grandmother got too ill to care for him. And so then it was at that time that he returned to the care of his mom and his stepfather. And so it's important for me to establish and to learn as a foster youth that my parents were also foster youth and raised by other people due to circumstances out of their control, due to the innocence of their childhood. And when I learned this, it just continued on with the deep healing that is happening, especially in our generation. My Auntie Ramona Bennett tells me the story of driving to my mom's foster home in Zid Zalalich in Seattle every weekend in attempt to pick my mom up for powwows and cultural events after she was first placed with Catholic Family Services. When my Auntie Ramona would arrive, the white foster parents would turn her away and say, "My mom can't go because she had to babysit their children." And my auntie recognized the importance of my mom staying connected to her culture and also being a child, just being able to be a teenager with access to family. And the idea of my mom being a live-in babysitter for these families did not sit well with my Auntie Ramona. So she did something about it. In the 60s, Auntie would work with brilliant attorneys to create policy that would prevent foster youth from being forced to be babysitters before the age of 16 as a direct result of my mom's circumstances. And just as my auntie took action, my mom was witnessing the stripping of Native children from their families and communities. And as soon as she was 18, she herself began fostering any Native children that needed a home so that they would not be removed like she was. And again, these actions are taken not out of choice, but out of necessity and lived experience. And after that, my mom attended and graduated from Evergreen State College. And it was in that era, in the 70s, when her generation took a stand to keep Native children with family and friends and community members before being exiled to non-Native peoples who had no connection to their identities. In fact, my mom joined her sister cousin. So Ramona's mom and my grandma were sisters. So they're raised as cousins raised as sisters. That's just how it is in a lot of our family structures. So she joined her sister Ramona in contributing testimony and writing policy to the local Indian Child Welfare Act of 1972 in the state of Washington, which was birthed out of the needs of the youth in Seattle, Zid Zalalich. And then they both went on to use that same framework to contribute to the National Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978. So my birth mom helped to create the policy that then later on in life, the act that that impacted my life. And so again, I'm like learning all of this information out of my own curiosity and my own desire to know more. And I just want to take a moment to reflect and imagine what my life would have been like if I had not been able to learn these stories firsthand from my relatives, had I not had opportunities to stay with families inside of my Suquamish and S'Klallam families and communities, and to take another moment and be grateful for the historic and iconic contributions of so many before us, without expanding too much on the course of my mom's life after the 70s and 80s. I just always want to state and let it be known that, she is very much in my prayers every day, and our empathy for all that she has done. Again, many would probably know her as Nancy Chiquiti, Nancy Alexis, Peppy. She has deep roots in the self-determination and the sovereignty of not just Suquamish, but many Washington based tribes and beyond. And it's important to recognize all that she has endured in these processes, in these efforts, in these movements, and, that she knows that we love her, that I love her, that I thank her for my life, and I pray for her every day. And, it's an honor for me to be able to call her and say, hey, this is what I'm up to. What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Is this okay? Can I say this? Can I let this be known? This is important and difficult family history, but we understand the importance that it has in the work and shaping how we move forward. And I'm shifting to the lived experiences of my father. He and his siblings and cousins were all raised by their maternal grandmother for some period of their childhoods. And he remembers being 7 years old the first time an adult told him, "You're never going to amount to anything." 7 years old. When he returned to the care of his mom, they moved around the country based on where his stepfather was stationed in the Navy. And when he was 14, they were living in Illinois. And at that age, the same age that my mom was, at 14 years old, is when he received word from the res that his father had died. And so he made his way back to Suquamish to attend his father's funeral as a young teenage Suquamish man. And the trauma that causes for anyone is deep, but also to process at that age is difficult. And he then took about 2 weeks to make his way back to Illinois. When he finally made it back, the principal of his school informed him he missed too much school, in that one interaction, completely discouraged him, implied that he missed school because he was slacking off, he's not taking it seriously, he's not going to succeed. Zero empathy for the grief, for the loss of his father, for the travel that it took to get home to the funeral and back, or his age, 14 years old, dealing with this devastation. And this one conversation with the principal, with an adult, with a trusted adult, with an adult with power, systemic power, had discouraged him from moving on in his education. And again, like these are the moments that we can reflect on and see how differently that could have gone had that one conversation been different, or had been led with empathy or compassion. And we know what we are learning, what it was like for Native peoples in those decades. What it didn't do, however, was steal his innate ability to work hard and help others. His life, his access to education, his access to be human and respond to grief and mourning was stripped from him, but he also knew he had to work to continue to survive. And so he dropped out of school. An 8th grade education was the furthest that he was able to complete. And he just started to work. I mean, he has had jobs for carpet installation, a gas station clerk, a shoemaker, a gray iron worker, maintenance. He's been a fisherman and harvested seafood his entire life. Even though his education was stripped, he still found a way to do his best to survive. And, it's been 12 years now that he has since become a daily part of my adult life. And we have healed deeply beside one another, knowing the possibility of reunification and restoration. And I spent my entire childhood questioning why. Why wasn't I important enough? Why wasn't I good enough? Why wasn't I just enough for my parents to want to try? And those are questions that just come from that deeply uh reality, that deep reality of abandonment and belonging. And as I got older, the need for those answers dwindled, the more that I strengthened my sense of security and identity and embraced the importance of context and how important context is always. And when I stopped demanding the need for answers and embraced an attitude of forgiveness without the need for apology, the information began to come naturally and organically with both of my parents. Um, at the age of 23, I sat in my father's living room when he finally felt safe enough to explain to me the circumstances of his life when he abandoned me and our family. I was 23 years old when my dad genuinely apologized for not being there for me and my siblings. And he didn't make any excuses, but he provided an explanation, which absolutely helped me to heal the sense of belonging that so many foster children grapple with on our journeys. And it's important to say that I now spend every day with my dad. He's 73 years old, and we take adventures, we just complete our regular daily tasks together, and we talk on the phone like maybe 6 times a day. And we attend whatever community events we can together. And it is all to me, because of the foster parents who guided me and molded me to be a confident decision maker, to understand how decisions can produce a variety of possible outcomes. And to some degree, I can write the story in whatever direction I want and I choose. So the last foster family that I lived with was from when I was 15 until I turned 18. And at the time, I had no real interest in knowing either of my birth parents. I had big emotions, big thoughts. I was at a crossroads about aging out and stepping fully into adulthood. And my mom, Marjorie Lawrence, who is Tulalip and has been married here to Suquamish into our family for decades, she offered me the safest place to heal and the strongest skill that anyone could have gifted me, which was the power of envisioning. And she simply presented possible ways to write my story moving forward. I could make the choice not to get to know my parents and live my life with that boundary in place, and it would be justified. Also, I could invite them to eat, find some way to build a connection, get to know them and what happened to them, forgive them, and make the memories with them as adults that we did not get to make in my childhood. And when she presented these two scenarios to me at the age of 18, I was like, wow, like the second one just sounds so much better. It just sounds better. Like when you're reading and writing stories, like I like the way that one sounds. And I had a hard time seeing it, but just to learn to envision that was such a profound gift that this trusted adult in my life offered to me, right? And so I wish everyone had a Marjorie. I don't know how else to say that other than, thank you, Mom, and I love you, and thank you for your patience and your guidance as I navigated everything at my own pace, and that's the other thing that she did really well, was just followed my lead, which is not, which, and I don't know if I apologize, but it was not the case for the rest of my upbringing. It wasn't, I wasn't, as a foster youth, I wasn't feeling embraced and advocated for. I wasn't feeling like I was a leader in the course of my life. And so to have that in someone, maybe for the first time ever, especially in, 15, 16, 17 years old, was again like powerful, and I'm really grateful for that. I also feel like it's important to name that the level of optimism that I share from today, like, is a choice. It is a lifelong skill that I have acquired, and I always try to emphasize that it's not to be exceptionalized or projected upon any other foster children, and that I've never felt proud per se of being the exception, and that we all have such unique experiences that it's very difficult, and it's a lot of mental and internal labor to reach these levels of optimism, and the choices in from which we see which perspectives we see our stories, and reflection. So I won't spend too much time on this next portion, but I do want to say, it's okay to take care of yourselves however you need to. If you need to drink some water, or, turn your camera off or anything like that. It might be a little bit heavier than what I've talked about so far. And I just, I have tried my best to be very open and honest about the level of traumas that have come from the systemic separation and history of oppression that has impacted all Native families for generations, not just mine. My dear friends and extended family at Native Wellness Institute have held so much space for my healing journey, and I wanted to share one of the tangible resources, many, many tangible resources that was introduced to me. And this is called the Trauma Web. And I printed out a blank version of the Trauma Web. So this is a resource from Native Wellness Institute, which you can find on their website, or also I can email to Cassie or to Lena to distribute to anyone who might be interested. So the columns on the left list various types of trauma that can affect our lives. The column on the right lists some characteristics of trauma. So any of these may have affected you, your parents, your grandparents, or other people who have had significant impact in your life, on your life. For each trauma and characteristic that has affected you, your family, or significant others, draw a line connecting the trauma, this is you, to you in the center of the page, okay? So here is my trauma web. Okay. To physically see this on a piece of paper typed out was a lot for me, because I had been carrying it and feeling it and knowing it and living with it. But this was the first time I had a physical representation of every type of trauma that has impacted me, my parents, my grandparents, or any significant people in my life. Okay, and now I'm going to read what they are. The column on the left, various types of trauma: death of a loved one, gambling addiction, emotional abuse, drug addiction, physical abuse, verbal abuse, cultural loss, alcoholism, neglect, racism, divorce, poverty, violence, disability, relocation, foster care, adoption, oppression, sexual abuse, loss of a job, boarding schools, war experiences, loss of spirituality, discrimination of any kind. Okay, I have been impacted by every single trauma listed here, and maybe some that have not been listed here. And then on the right-hand side are characteristics of trauma. Frequent periods of depression, difficulty hearing positives, fear of conflict and anger, continuing sense of guilt, need to be in control, fear of dependency, overly responsible, very irresponsible, overachievement, poor self-images, the need to be right, fear of trusting, perfectionism, chaos, addiction to chaos, fear of feeling, fear of intimacy, underachievement, denial of problems, fear of incompetence, compulsive behavior, heavily depends on others, repetitive relationship behavior, unable to relax, let go, and have fun, hypersensitive to the needs of others. And again, these are just some, I'm sure, of many. And so, oh, wow, y'all. I was like, okay, I'm seeing my trauma web, like physically, you know. And then I was like, wow, like what do these webs look like for my family? Yeah, like what do these webs look like for my friends? And then I was like, what about every person in our community? And then complete strangers, like my mind is just going and I'm like, whew, I don't know. I just, in my mind, I'm just like, okay, like this is the trauma web, like over people's heads as I interact with them. I'm like, like I can't imagine what others are carrying that we don't know, that we don't see. And further, what would this web look like for you, for each of you here today? What would your trauma web look like? And you're actually welcome to download this and fill it out for yourself if that feels helpful. If not, that's okay too. My next question is, what does this web look like for each of the young people that you serve, you personally, that you serve? What would this web look like for each foster youth that you currently serve? If you could see through this representation, what impacts each child, would it strengthen your empathy? Would it strengthen the way that you approach their unique situations and the ways in which you make decisions on their behalf? Like keeping the bigger picture in mind at all times, in every interaction, every decision, every meeting, every hearing, et cetera, et cetera. If this representation of all that they are carrying as children, how might that inform our decision making, right? Whew. So we're witnessing a reclamation of abundance-based thinking in our healing networks, So as an example, I went from actually thinking in my mind, I have no parents as a child. I have no parents, to these are my foster parents for now, but they're eventually going to abandon me. I'm not their real kid, to I have many foster parents, but my parents still aren't there for me, to I have two people who created me and brought me into this world, a call away, a visit away, while others sadly can't say the same. And I still choose to think I don't have parents. Okay. This is my train of thought over several years. To finally today, as a 30-year-old woman, in incorporating abundance-based thinking in my life, instead of just 2 birth parents, I have 15 total people who took on parental roles in my life to help me get to this day. I have 15 parents, and I used to think I had none. I used to believe that. I used to embody that. and through lots and lots and lots of internal work and information and vulnerability and being willing to listen and learn, I can now say today, I move through the world like I have 15 parents. And how beautiful is that abundance? And it has, out of every phase that I have existed, this has been my favorite mindset to live in gratitude and abundance. And again, like seeing forced adaptation as a blessing, like embracing times of transition as a blessing, having spatial awareness, reading the room that I'm in, that's a blessing, abstaining from substances and self-medicating that caused my family's separation, that's a blessing. Seeing curiosity and survival skills, I'm seeing them all as blessings. But again, we have to be mindful not to exceptionalize my choice to see that, And I always just, encourage anyone, like, you're welcome to guide young people, my way or to others as examples to look to if they'd like. But I just always want to be mindful, like not to hold them in comparison or expectation of seeing their circumstances through that lens if they're not there yet or not ready yet or don't have the tools yet, and we can always offer them if possible. So I'm gonna make an assumption here that the work that each of you do is probably framed around the idea of serving at-risk youth. Um, and And I've heard that a lot in my life, being an at-risk youth and working with or for at-risk youth, and foster youth usually fall into this category, this language. And one of my mentors, he's Tlingit, Cherokee, and Filipino, and his name is Gene Tagaban. And we were at this gathering one time, and he was talking to a group of us foster youth, and he said, you always hear that term, you're at risk, we're here working with at-risk youth. And he said, you know what, you are at risk. And we were all like, whew, okay, here we go. Like, how's this gonna go? Tell us how we're at risk of, whatever stereotypes or whatever, people think of when they think of us. He said, you are at risk of revealing what doesn't work honestly and constructively. You are at risk of being great, of becoming great. You are at risk of being courageous leaders. You are at risk of helping our communities feel safe enough to do necessary healing. You are at risk of identifying new ways to strengthen our family structures, whether that's with our birth families or our chosen families. You are at risk of learning our ancestral languages, practicing our traditional art forms. You are at risk of being cultural keepers for our peoples. You are at risk of becoming musicians and poets and dancers and actors and athletes and childcare providers and marine biologists and coaches and physical trainers and caregivers and advocates. You are absolutely at risk of being critical thinkers. You are at risk of being bridges and at risk of indigenizing our relationships with safety and control and autonomy and empowering young people. We are at risk of becoming healthy parents and interrupting and ending cycles of harm and trauma. He's just going on. We are at risk of all these things. And we're just, this ain't the list we were thinking was coming, right? Gene, we are at risk of, at risk of acknowledging how Two-Spirit and LGBTQ and non-binary youth can teach us about inclusion and acceptance and individuality. We are the most at-risk youth to teach about adaptation and innovation. Okay, we are at risk of being invited to offer keynotes to other humans who are dedicated to cultivating healthy and brilliant young minds amidst trying times of our society. I mean, it's important to know we are literally battling climate crisis, over extraction, houselessness, extreme hunger, debilitating mental health conditions, opioid crisis, and self-medicating. We have lack to access to healthcare and rampant racism in every space. We are experiencing extreme incarceration, extreme police brutality, extreme gender violence, unimaginable violence against children. We are existing and combating the foster youth to prison nexus, the foster youth to military nexus, the foster youth to human trafficking nexus. All of these are happening in real time right now. Education, curriculum censorship, unsustainable oil and energy dependence, displacement. I mean, our young people are at risk of helping us to understand these things, helping us to identify them, and helping us to heal and solve all of these things that the world is facing. And it's going to take us making the commitment to trusting them and trusting that they can do it and trusting that they know. And we're constantly up against this, the way that our society has deemed young people, um, incapable or less valuable or, too naive, whatever those words might be. But they really know a lot. They see a lot. They learn a lot. And we can always strengthen our listening skills. So the idea of reframing the way that we see what an at-risk youth is and means, who they can be, who they are now. And if we are reclaiming language and words, in these both systemic legal spaces, in our minds, in our hearts, in our everyday conversations with people, with children, with youth, instead of just about them, I think that we have a real shot at continuing this healing, and we're here. We're ready to be heard. We're ready to be strong, and we're ready to continue on the work of the previous generations and those who came before us. So I know I have a couple of minutes left with you all, and I wanted to talk about this really special event that we had last month, and I also wanted to sing a song, but I feel like talking about this event is a little more important. And so I, again, tapped into this skill of envisioning, and I was invited to give a keynote in August about transition and adaptation. And those are two things that I'm pretty well versed in. Again, like not always by choice, but I embrace and welcome those skills in my life. And I thought like, wow, I could not have gotten to where I am today without every person who opened their hearts and their homes to me. And when I closed my eyes, I could see like every person who has ever helped me in any way, helped raise me, like just standing in a line. And I just this like snapshot that I had in my mind. And again, from 3 years old to 18 years old, I lived with many different families. And so it was like to see them all in one room was like just what I was seeing in my head. And so I was like, all right, this might be a little bit crazy, but I'm going to invite every foster parent or every person who ever helped raise me to this event. And I'm going to stand them up, and I'm going to publicly thank them and gift them and recognize them for just being there and, taking action when my parents needed support and help. And some of them have passed, some of them are ill, but I asked people to stand in for them. And so again, here we are, right? 13 total parents and two birth parents. And we wrapped each one of them in 8th generation blankets. And I just called them up chronologically from the time that I was able to live and spend with them. And so here's this picture of who we could get there to this event. And it was my brother and I. My brother Charles here, he and I were separated when we were younger, but all these people and more who didn't make it literally took shifts and transitions in our lives. And maybe it was 1 year, maybe it was 2, maybe it was 3 years. And it was just so much healing, so emotional, so powerful, so wonderful. And it was like, wow, what would it look like to show and physically see everyone who's had a hand in this and had a hand in my life and my healing and my survival and my opportunities to go beyond survival and to thrive. And so nothing like this has ever been done before in our community, but I had other previous foster youth, come to me in reflection and just express like how beautiful it was to witness and how many more evenings we can have like this to offer our gratitude and thanks. And I didn't only just thank my foster parents. We stood my mom and my dad up at the end because we love them, because they birthed us, because they created us out of love, and because it is still, if it weren't for them, and so to also stand my mom and dad up and recognize what they've been through was like just was really, really special and just like the words that escape me, what it represented and what it could become. So that is just something that I wanted to share with all of you. And I just thank you for your attention. I know I've covered a lot of ground and I just appreciate your love and empathy. Escudida chal twalbuk gwalapu Asia chal siaya chal o kwafwa tabu shala. We are grateful to all of you folks, our friends, our families, for coming to help us. These are the traditional teachings from a long time ago. When you take care of yourself, you take care of others, right? Abil chaf gwa oshabid chafa obo chafa kwaf walek chafa abalek. When you have compassion, then you will be kind, you will be helpful, you will be sharing. Hat have a patient mind. To uyayus to Asia chasla to tib was hogwat TCIIs hogwat T-Asiads hogwat. The ancestors of our people would work habitually with great effort so they could take care of their family and their people. O shabid chaf kwibak kwat chapa o shabitsu. You have compassion for all people and you have compassion for yourself. Hat qui saslab sabutlab. Watch over yourselves well. Hoyafjed. I am finished.
Oh my goodness. I don't have the words to be able to say how much I appreciate you and just am so honored to be able to have you join us to share your story, your truth, your healing, the language of our land. Wish we had more time with you and was thankful to squeeze even just a few more minutes. So thank you so much. Lots of love for you in the chat. We are forever grateful for your story, your powerful story, and for being personal, and just thank you for sharing your healing and inspiration. So much love for you, Calina. Thank you so much. Awesome. Please do take a while to check out the chat. And while we're doing that, I asked Angela if she could pull up our last couple of slides just to be able to say a big thank you to Cassie Anderson, who helped put all of this together, also with a team, a committee as well, that had also helped to support this, including the Alliance, our partners at the University of Washington Alliance, and also our Partners for Our Children. And so with that, I know that we had mentioned earlier, Partners for Our Children will be giving us the link that we could follow up and make sure that you have a post survey to be able to share with us more of what you would like in the future for us to continue to focus on, for us to be able to think about what else was missing. And then we will be in touch as we do our raffle for the dozen or so books that we had purchased from Sandy Whitehawk, A Child of the Indian Race. So we'll be announcing that soon. And then also stay tuned for these recordings that we do have for posting later on the Office of Tribal Relations website and on our YouTube channel. So with that, it's been a true honor to have all of you here with us. We look forward to seeing you all next year, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Hatningsen.